Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, Distribution Talk listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Kevin Higgenbotham. Kevin is the CEO of the Evergreen Marketing Group based in Dallas, Texas. I've known Kevin for a long time, and I appreciate his ability to cut through the minutia and get down to the programs that best serve his members. As you will hear, the key to building mutually beneficial relationships between channel partners comes down to planning and execution. There is no secret sauce, but this organization has a pretty robust kitchen. I enjoyed my conversation with Kevin, and I hope you will too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right. Well, hey, Kevin, thank you for coming on to Distribution Talk. Really appreciate you taking the time. It's always a pleasure to see your face as well.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's great to be here today.
Well, hey, as I know that you've listened to several episodes here, we like to talk a little bit about, your background with distribution, kind of where that whole journey started for you. So for the audience, could you share a little bit about, how you got involved with distribution?
Well, back in the day, many, many years ago, I was actually in the high-tech business back in the early 80s. So right about the time the PC came out. I worked for a high-tech graphics type company based in Austin, Texas, named Houston Instrument, oddly enough, that sold through distribution through a dealer network. So that was really my first exposure to distribution, was more in the technology space. I ultimately left there, joined General Electric in their super abrasives division, and ran a global team of marketing folks across the U.S. and had a staffer in Germany, and another one in Korea, another one in China, one in Japan. And I got to know the Concrete Sawing and Drilling Association, which is a trade association based here in the United States. And through that, I got to know some of the manufacturers such as Husqvarna, Diamond Products, and those type of manufacturers.
Okay.
And along the way, as I was leaving GE, one of those manufacturers came to me and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Evergreen Marketing Group?" And I, of course, had never heard of it. He said, "Well, they're looking for somebody and you might be a good fit for them." So I reached out to Evergreen and ultimately won the job and joined Evergreen in 1995. I've been here ever since.
What is Evergreen and who does it serve?
So Evergreen is a cooperative corporation of construction supply distributors. And then on the other side of the ball are the manufacturers who produce the products that the distributors sell into the construction space. The group was founded by 6 distributors back in 1989. So this is our 31st anniversary. And it was really formed because if you think back to that late 80s timeframe, distribution in general, particularly construction distribution in general, was being bombarded by all those big boxes. So back then you had not only Home Depot and Lowe's, but you had Heckinger's and Homefront and, all these different big boxes. And the fear was that those boxes were going to take the business away from, family-owned distribution companies. And so these 6 distributors got together and said, geez, if we look a little bit bigger, we can do some things that we can't do on our own. And that was really the genesis of the group, was those 6 coming together and saying, hey, if we teamed up, stayed independent, we could look bigger to the manufacturers and maybe have a value proposition that we can't do on our own.
Gotcha. I mean, because you see a lot of these marketing groups, sometimes it's said called a buying group, and sometimes they're called cooperatives. And I think those are different. Those are different types of organizations. I mean, Evergreen's really not a buying group. It has a little different value proposition. But what's the difference between these types of groups?
Well, there are true buying groups out there. And people ask me sometimes, is Evergreen a buying group? And I said, well, we don't buy anything as a group. So I kind of have trouble with that characterization. Our focus as a group has always been on really three things: training and education, business development, and partnering with our manufacturer partners. And so as an organization, what we focused on really is the people side of the business. And so we have an incredibly robust training and education program that we established, back in the early first year or two of the group, and have just been building on it ever since. Because if you think about what our members sell, and the primary products are power tools, power tool accessories, so think drill bits and saw blades and ladders and things of that nature, a contractor can buy those items from about 40 different places in pretty much any market they're in. And so why would a contractor come to an Evergreen distributor member versus anybody else? And we've always felt it was because of the quality of the people. So as you walk into an Evergreen location, a branch, the people behind the counter know what they're talking about. The outside salespeople who are calling on the contractors at the job site level, they know what they're talking about because they've been through an extensive training program. We also focus, quite frankly, on helping the distributors and the manufacturers build a better relationship. Distributors and manufacturers are, in some cases, oil and water. They don't really mix well.
Right.
So what we've tried to do is help them learn how to communicate with one another in a fashion that creates an opportunity to grow the business together and really become partners as opposed to two sides of the ball, if you will.
So, before we get into that one, because I think that's definitely an area we want to jump into and talking about that relationship between the two and you all helping facilitate that relationship a little bit better. I know that you spent some time on the board of directors for a group of cooperatives like yourselves. Could you talk a little bit about what the big difference is between these cooperatives and a trade association, for example? What are some of the big differences and why would someone join one or the other, or do they typically join both? How does that work?
To back up and kind of look at cooperatives as a general, and to your point, I did have the pleasure of serving on the board of the National Cooperative Business Association, which is really the apex organization in the United States for cooperatives. And the big difference between, say, a cooperative and a trade association is cooperatives are member owned. So in the case of virtually every cooperative out there, it's the members who are the owners of that organization. Whereas a trade association, you pay dues and you get to join if you fit the profile, but you're not an owner of the association. And so in terms of the span of where cooperatives are, every credit union is a cooperative. Ocean Spray Cranberry Juice is a cooperative. REI is a cooperative.
Yeah.
And then if you look into the industrial sectors, there are cooperatives in virtually, I would hazard a guess that there's probably more than one in virtually every industrial sector you can think of. So HVAC distribution, electrical distribution, safety distribution, every one of those sectors has a cooperative serving the members within that. And because they're member owned, they're member driven. So in Evergreen's case, we have 58 member shareholders. So I wake up every day thinking about my 58 bosses and what do I need to do to help them be successful. And so that's what drives me. So I don't have a motivation that a trade association executive might have or a buying group executive may have, because we're focused on delivering what our members are asking us to do. And what our members are asking us to do is train their people and help develop relationships between themselves and the manufacturers.
Yeah, it's one of those questions that a lot of people will ask, and they don't really understand what is the difference between these, because the growth of these cooperatives, it really was in the 80s. I mean, and really that was kind of the big proliferation of this type of entity, whereas trade associations have been going on for decades, if not centuries. I mean, I want to say not a really new phenomena, but a lot of people still have a lot of misunderstandings as to the differences between those two and the role they serve in the eyes of the distributor.
Well, certainly in the industrial sectors, I would agree with you. Early 80s, late 70s was really where a lot of those co-ops got started.
Yeah.
But in some of the other sectors, which just kind of a fun fact, there are 20,000 cooperatives in the United States.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
One of the largest organizations in Spain is a cooperative. There are cooperatives that are organizing the coffee growers in East Asia and providing them a market. And that's where like Starbucks gets a lot of their coffees through a cooperatives based in East Asia. So you'd be surprised if you look around your communities how many cooperatives are out there. And the cooperative business model has been out there, golly. NCBA is 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So this model has been out there for quite some time. And the National Cooperative Business Association has a very active and ongoing international program. I mean, literally to the tune of, $50 to $60 million a year, as well as a very robust program of lobbying at the federal level in Washington, D.C.
So going back to, if we could just jump back on the thread of the manufacturer-distributor relationship and where you all facilitate that role, because I think that was really kind of an interesting fact. And that really is one of the big value propositions, at least in my opinion, of what you all bring to the table to the distributors you serve, but then other cooperatives as well, is that planning process. Because let's face it, distributors and manufacturers working together has never been an easy process. It's, as you said, oil and water, but they're at odds. I mean, if you go back to the Mike Marks book, that talks about that divergent, they've got two different agendas. They're both in it to make money on either side. So how do we get them to plan and to work together and to make more money together?
Well, you refer to Mike Marks's book on working at cross purposes, and that's really, if you think about what does a distributor do versus what a manufacturer does, they pass in the night. They don't even come close to doing anywhere close to the same thing. And so certainly the first step is to earn trust. Mm-hmm. And there is a basic mistrust on the part of distribution about manufacturing. Number one, there's always the fear. There's this constant lingering fear out there, just right behind the surface, of what if these guys go direct?
Absolutely. That's the heresy right there, man. That is when they go direct, that's heresy in the mind of a distributor. That's evil.
Absolutely. So what you have is step one is to create an environment where you can build some trust between the two. And what we try to do at Evergreen, we developed back in, 1995-ish or so, a program we call Planning for Profit. And what Planning for Profit is designed to do is to get the distributors at the local level and the manufacturer representatives at the local and national level together to sit down and honestly talk through how do we work together to grow the business? Because you're right, Jason. Most distributors wake up in the morning and just go out and try to sell some more stuff. And in some cases, unfortunately, it's a paper route. They're going around and they're saying, what do you need today, Joe? And trying to fill those needs. What we try to do through Planning for Profit is to get them to be a little bit more strategic with a handful of their key suppliers such that they can really map out a plan that is for the entire year. What are we going to do strategically in terms of introducing new products or getting our people more trained on your products so that we can work together and sell more? Then the whole issue of, geez, I want the manufacturer salespeople to be riding with the distributor salespeople. Mm-hmm. Well, talk about a trust factor there.
Absolutely.
The salesperson on the distributor side is not inherently eager to share his customers with anybody,
Mm-hmm.
much less someone who he kind of thinks might actually go direct at some point in the future. So what we've tried to do through Planning for Profit is really lay the foundation where the distributor members and the manufacturer partners can begin to work together, earn that trust, and, obviously grow the business better. And we've got metrics out there where I can measure the growth rate of distributors who are doing Planning for Profit with 5 or 6 or 10 manufacturers versus the growth rate with those manufacturers that they're not doing Planning for Profit with. And it is consistently higher with the Planning for Profit partners. And so we've been able to demonstrate over time with that data to the distributor side that, hey, this is worth your time to do.
Yeah. I mean, going back on my career, and, I grew up in the Evergreen family. I mean, I know a lot about, how this works, but you were back there pretty much at the beginning of this. How has that program evolved? It was brought on by, Edge or Safeway originally, but how has that program evolved so it actually now has traction and teeth? Because it's a very strong program today, but I suspect it wasn't as strong or well adopted early on.
Yeah, you're right about that. And the way the program started is we were paying for performance. We set aside a certain amount of money that we said, if you have a planning meeting with the manufacturer, we'll send you $100. If you put up a manufacturer's display, we'll send you $150. If you do this, we'll send you $200, et cetera, until you kind of maxed it out. And quite frankly, in the early days, folks gamed the system. They'd put the display up, take a picture of it, get their $150, and then take the display down.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and it was laborious and paperwork and heavy and all this. And so it became pretty clear to us that really the important thing was not what they did, but the fact that they planned together, that they sat down and talked. And so we evolved the program over time to focus on the process as opposed to the activities within that process.
Okay.
And then again, by having metrics that we could demonstrate, here's the benefits, you grow faster.
Mm-hmm.
I think that got people to be more willing to give it a shot. And, quite frankly, it's like anything. People grow weary of what they're trying to say faster than the people who are listening to what you're trying to say. So what I mean by that is we just keep the drumbeat going, talking about Planning for Profit on a consistent basis, showing examples of success and those kind of things that has created a situation where it's just become part of the culture. We're going to do this. Our expectation is you will do this. And certainly as we grew as an organization and brought in new members, the expectation was laid down at the very beginning. This is how we grow the business and we expect you to do this. And so pretty much since, the late 90s, anybody who's joined Evergreen as a distributor member kind of says, well, geez, if I'm going to join, this is what I got to do. So we've gotten people on board as a result of that as well.
It seems to me, Kevin, and this hadn't occurred to me more, but this process has to be sold really deeper to the distributor because they seem to be the ones that are more wary than the manufacturers. The manufacturers have to be all in on this deal. I mean, they have to be like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But the distributor, it's a harder sell for sure.
Yeah, it does take time and it does require some resources on their part. Distributors, particularly if you look at our space, which is commercial construction supply. And for the most part, our folks are not selling building materials. So if you're talking to a commercial electrician who's building a 10-story project, that contractor has spec'd out every fixture, every foot of conduit, every bit of wire, everything. It's all on the spec. But our folks don't sell much of that stuff. Our folks sell the tools, the fasteners, the work-related products to get those things installed. So what happens is the electrician shows up for the project and realizes, geez, I got 8-foot ladders, I need 12-foot ladders. Or, boy, I need 4 more screw guns, or whatever the case may be. And it's a fire drill every day of, I got to get this. If I wanted it tomorrow, I'd ask for it tomorrow. And so that creates within the distributor community this firefighter mentality. And they are really good firefighters. They can charge in there and get it done, deliver on time, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't create a mentality of we're going to sit down and talk about 2 quarters from now.
Right.
That's just not in their DNA. And
Right.
so it took some time to get them accustomed to you can slow down to speed up, if you know what I mean, in terms of just getting things done.
Yeah, you slow down and think about how am I going to execute this versus having it thrown at you every single day. Again, growing up in that business, I absolutely know what that feels like. And boy, to my recollection, there weren't any great planners out there for a long time. I mean, now over the years, now we've seen a few distributors, get really good at this process. Those are always aspirational. You look at those and say, yeah, I'd love to be like that guy. What does make a good participant in this? What's the right stuff to really be successful in this planning process?
Well, number one, you got to do what you say you're going to do on both the distributor side and the manufacturer side. That sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but if you think about on the distributor side, any given distributor within our space is dealing with upwards of 300-400 manufacturers. On the manufacturer side, that local rep has probably got a book of customers that might be 40 or 45 different companies. And so the ability to stay organized and actually deliver what you say you're going to do is key. The second thing is, and this is what I tell all the distributors and all the manufacturers that I speak to, is you got to write everything down. If you don't write it down and you don't put it in a calendar, it's not going to happen. So I use a Chinese saying that says, the palest ink is stronger than the strongest memory. So basically, if you write things down, you're more likely to do it. So I'm a list maker. I encourage people to be list makers and put things in their calendar. The second thing is on the manufacturer side, I think it's key that the manufacturer, local folks, the sales reps at the local side, understand the difference between independent distribution and corporate distribution, if you will. A lot of the manufacturers in our space, they're groomed in the home center market, and then they're brought over into the independent distribution space. And they think everybody should be the same because all the home centers are the same. What we try to communicate is, hey, you need to understand that Evergreen member A is not the same as Evergreen member B. The owner doesn't think the same. There's a process of getting to know one another and asking the right questions and being curious about the business and understanding how the distributor makes money. And so we've over time developed a workshop that we do around the country on an annual basis. And it's focused on bringing those manufacturer, local salespeople into a room, whether it's in San Francisco or Philly or Atlanta or Dallas, and basically going through a one-day program of teaching them how distribution thinks. And to do that, we bring distributors in to say, answer questions. And what comes out of that is everybody leaves their room saying, well, geez, that guy thought this way and this guy thought that way. They are really different. They're all in the same group, but they're different. And so I need to treat them differently. And then, it's just the basics of the plan. There's no secret sauce there. Training the distributor salespeople on the new products. Mm-hmm. It's setting up work with joint sales calls, doing events, and all of those basic things. But the key is writing it down.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to be successful to plan in, let's say, the following year, when do you start sitting down with that manufacturer or vice versa? How long does that take?
Well, we ask our members to make their picks on who they're going to do plans with in the October, November timeframe. And to have those planning sessions in the December, January timeframe. Because, for the most part, that tends to be a slower period around the country, weather-wise and all of that, holidays, et cetera. That allows them to hit the ground running as early as possible in January after the turn of the year.
Yeah, good. At least 90 days, is what you're saying. At least a 90-day shot at it. And and if you think about it, there is a lot of coordination that has to occur throughout that process. But, the distributors, that are good at it, boy, they tend to be head and shoulders above the ones that just kind of fluff through it, or they kind of go through the motions.
I have a member in Atlanta who, by December 22nd of every year, he has his plans all set with about 12 to 15 manufacturers. His plans are all set, documented on a calendar, and communicated to everybody in his company by that date. And so he wakes up January 1st or whatever the first work day of the year is, and he knows where he's going with those manufacturers. And he's got it all loaded into his Outlook calendar. It pops up a reminder when something's supposed to be happening. He picks up the phone, confirms that it's happening, and he's a happy guy. And you're right. He's a role model when it comes to this planning program.
But if you look at that, that organization, and I happen to know the organization pretty well, the success over the years, it's clear evidence. That this actually does work, that, really putting a plan together and then sticking to that plan throughout the year, that absolutely has led to the success of that organization.
Absolutely. And, the other thing I would also point out is that the key is regular follow-up on the plan.
Yeah.
So what I recommend to everybody who's doing this is in that first planning session where you're deciding what we're going to do together, who's going to be working with whom, et cetera, you don't leave that room without first setting quarterly checkpoints. So we're going to check on first quarter, the first week of April, et cetera, throughout the year, because the worst thing to do is continue to execute a plan that's not working.
Right.
And then B, to not know that it's not working until third quarter, where you have nothing, you can't make any changes. So we strongly recommend that follow-up dates be set. And, they can be on the phone, it can be face-to-face, but they need to be set.
Yeah, it sounds to me, that part of your role in this is not only facilitator, but referee and cheerleader and coach and keep them going. I think without all of the follow-up that you do, a lot of them would just kind of fall by the wayside. I think they would really fall apart on this.
And again, we were guilty as charged in the early days of having a very paper-heavy system. We were running on fax machines and paper was going here and there. And we had filing cabinets full of paper to try and track all this stuff. Thank goodness for the internet and bandwidth, because we've now put it all for about the last 7-8 years. It's all been on our website. Mm-hmm. And so the selection process is relatively easy. The members go in and pick who they want to do plans with. The communication process between, manufacturer X has been picked is automated. And then on a quarterly basis, we're pinging the members and the suppliers to provide feedback, which is available to both sides. So at any given time after the quarter closes, a distributor or manufacturer can go out and click a button and see what his planning partners are saying about it. It's basically free text commentary on whatever's working, whatever's not working, but it creates that feedback loop that has to be regular to keep it on track.
Obviously, this process, you all have refined it quite a bit over the years, but say that I'm in the beauty supply space and I would like to put together a program with one supplier, one person. I just want to get started. What would you do first?
Well, and we have a number of members who are on a relatively small side and they struggle with some of the process. And what we suggest to them is just limit your picks and then have an agenda in mind in terms of, okay, in some cases you may need to look back into the prior history and say, what went wrong or right last year with this particular manufacturer? Mm-hmm. And what can we do this year to not repeat those mistakes? In the case of working together with the sales force, how can I get my sales force willing to work with their sales force to try to drive the business? Mm-hmm. To me, it comes down to a desire to do something better than you did it before. So nobody plans to fail, right, but a lot of people fail to plan. And so it comes down to, do you know what you're going to do when you wake up in the morning? And then if you apply that to your business, do you know what you're going to do when January comes along with this particular manufacturer, or what you'd like to do? It comes down to forcing yourself to have the discipline to ask yourself that question so that you just don't kind of go through the motions doing the same thing over and over and over again. We are all guilty of repeating mistakes over and over again.
Sure.
The trick is to try to get yourself out of that and figure out, okay, I'm going to do something a little bit different this time, and I'm going to have a plan.
Well, Kevin, hey, I really appreciate you going through this stuff, because I think that, a lot of folks, they don't plan well. They tend to firefight. And this is in a lot of the industries that I've been around and spent a lot of time, that there isn't this conscious effort. So it sounds to me like really one of the big first steps is sitting down and saying, I'm going to start a plan with one or two folks, some key suppliers that I'm working with. And then really it's writing down some outcomes, getting it on a calendar. Here's when we're going to check in. Here's what we're going to do together.
Absolutely. And what I would add to that, Jason, is hold people accountable and be willing to be held accountable, because we all drop the ball sometimes. And so, we need to understand that, hey, the guy who calls you out for dropping the ball is actually probably your best friend, because they're the ones that are going to keep you on task, that will help you improve the next day. And so that would be the other piece to it, is hold each other accountable and don't let things slide, because that's how we all end up kind of just staying mediocre. We don't want that.
Nope, we do not want that. All right, my friend. Well, hey, again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing some thoughts with us, and look forward to the next time our paths cross.
All right. See you soon.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application, or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.